Hello and welcome back to Goblin Gaming. Today we're going to be showing you a build which is going to be a lightning spear build with charged bolts as your primary core spender. It's basically a pet summon build. It is capable of clearing Nightmare Dungeon 100s and it should be good in the abattoir Zir. Let's go ahead and start off with what we're using for equipment with this build. Then we'll look at talents, specs, and Paragon. On the left you can see gameplay going through of a random Nightmare Dungeon 100 clear. At one point during the clear, I do get stuck in the floor somehow, so I have to teleport back out and back in, but it's whatever. Alright, let's go ahead and look at this. So, first thing you're going to do is you're going to run the Godslayer's Crown on your helmet. This is going to give you a group up pull-in effect for your elites. It's also going to give you a big 30 to 60x damage multiplier. I happen to have a 48x here. I mean, it's not best rolled, but it's still good enough. We're going to use Ever-Living Tunic to reduce the amount of damage we take from vulnerable enemies. Everything is always going to be pretty much vulnerable. You also want to be getting max life on this, damage reduction from distant enemies. You don't really want the lightning damage, that just happens to be what I have for a roll on it right now. I'd much rather have another toughness stat here, but lightning damage does add to my overall damage, so that's fine. For gloves, we're going to be doing the piercing static aspect. This lets charge bolts pierce, and on this one it is important to note you actually want the lowest roll possible to get the most benefit, so that's actually important. This piece of gear is particularly important for this build. You want to have this exact set of stats. You want to have critical strike, lucky hit, chance to restore primary resource, and ranks of charge bolts. Obviously this didn't roll as good as it could have, but those are the general stats you need to have to make this build function. Tiabet's Will is going to give us unstoppable resource multiplier whenever we go unstoppable. So whenever we teleport, whenever we use flame shield, and whenever we dash, we're going to get a big damage multiplier. We're also going to restore 50 primary resource. This is a major mana generation engine for us and is absolutely essential to the build. You could go with Temerity if you have a really good amount of resource generation and lucky hit chance to generate resource. But I still think the damage you're losing with Tiabet's Will would be probably not worth it, although Temerity does provide some pretty smooth gameplay as you're starting to gear up. Resources just become the main issue. Esu's Heirloom is our boost that we're going to be using. This is going to be giving us a big damage multiplier by giving us lots more critical strike. We're also going to be getting movement speed after dashing and movement speed after killing elites. This is going to play in well with our Ravenous Vampiric aspect that we're going to be utilizing, so that's important. For our weapon, we're going to want to use the Staff of Lam Essen. This is going to allow your charge bolts to last up to 3 times longer and heat seek on enemies, which is very, very nice. It is also wonderful that it rolls crit strike damage, lightning damage, damage to close, and primary resource restore on it by default. If you want to go one hand and a source, you want to make sure you're using a wand. And then you want to make sure on the source you're going to have as much resource generation, mana cost reduction, and chance to restore primary resource as you can. The only downside to that is you pretty much have to be in melee if you're using a wand and a source versus Lam Essen. You do have the option of firing from a mid-range if you wish. The necklace slot we're going to be using for Aspect of Disobedience to give us more damage reduction. That's pretty important, especially as you get into the Nightmare Hundreds plus. And then for the ring, we're going to be using the Prodigy's Loop, which is going to be giving us mana restore whenever we use a cooldown. I don't know if this is strictly necessary with Tiabet's Will. You might be able to swap it out for something else. Go ahead and experiment around with this. I did have a build where I was using the X-Falls, which is pretty cool, but it just was a little bit mana hungry, so I went back to this. And then we're going to be running Talrasha's Iridescent Loop to give us a big damage multiplier, resource generation, cooldown reduction, lucky hit chance, non-physical, all very important stats. It should be noted that itemization wise on the necklace you want to get plus ranks to conjuration skills, and then I chose to make this a defensive amulet by taking total armor damage reduction. I would recommend you do the same if you're planning on pushing abattoir Zir, but you can feel free to glass it out if you want for speed running. And that's that. Let's go ahead and look at the vampiric powers. We're going to be taking Undying to give us lots of health sustain so we don't die. Pretty important. We're going to be grabbing Metamorphosis so that we have an extra source of Unstoppable and an easy way to inflict Vampiric Curse, although that doesn't really matter because we're going to make everything vulnerable all the time anyway, so that's not as big of a deal. It's mostly for the Unstoppable and for the Tiabet's Will. Ravenous is going to give us 20% chance to increase our attack speed by 40% of our total movement speed, and it's a lucky hit proc, so that's why it's important for us to be stacking lucky hit stats on our main gear, such as on our gloves, on our necklace, and on our ring whenever possible. The ring, you also want crit strike chance and crit strike damage, and then max life. Anticipation is going to give us cooldown reduction for our all-important unstable currents, which is just going to be spamming and spawning a bunch of lightning spears, which is the crux of the build, the lightning spears. And then we're going to take Prey on the Weak for a damage multiplier, and then whenever anything has Vampiric Curse on it, is also vulnerable, but that doesn't really matter. We can make things vulnerable all the time anyway, so there you go. You could potentially swap this out for something else if you wish. This one's a little bit more flexible. Everything else is pretty static. Alright, let's go ahead and take a look now at the Paragon board. Oh, actually, let's look at the talents first, I suppose, eh? That probably makes more sense. Alrighty. For the primary stat, it really doesn't matter. I was just playing around with a lot of different things, but just put 2 points in wherever. It really doesn't matter for the primary. Then once we move on to our core setup, we are going to take 1 rank into Devastation for a little extra max mana, but more importantly, so that we can put 3 points into Elemental Dominance. And then we're just going to throw a single point into Potent Warding to kind of smooth out our resistances as we level up our glyphs. We're going to put full points into Charge Bolts. Then we're going to go Enhanced Charge Bolt and Destructive Charge Bolt so that we can reduce damage enemies deal whenever they're hit by our Charge Bolts, which they're always going to be hit by our Charge Bolts. We're going to take a rank of Flame Shield, moving on into the defensive side. We don't need the extra points, so go ahead and skip those. Grab a rank of Teleport, and then Enhanced Teleport, and of course Shimmering Teleport for damage reduction after each teleport. We're going to take 1 rank into Elemental Attunement, so we have a lucky hit chance to reset the cooldowns of our defensive abilities. Both of these defensive abilities do proc to its will, so they not only act defensively, giving us a lot of extra toughness, but they also give us massive damage multipliers. Moving down into Conjuration, this is the crux of the build. You're going to want to put a point into Ice Blades. Yeah, just a single point into Ice Blades. And then as many points as you can, max out the Lightning Spear. We're going to take Enhanced Lightning Spear and Invoked Lightning Spear. This is going to make it so that Lightning Spear stuns enemies for 2.33 seconds while critical striking, and they gain extra critical strike chance for the duration. We're also going to be upping the duration through the Paragon board. Take 3 points into Conjuration Mastery, so we get a 3x multiplier for every Lightning Spear you have out, every Ice Blade you have out. We can get anywhere from 6 to 15 of these out at a time, so take that, multiply it by 3, and I think you can see how this amps up your damage quite a lot. Then you're going to take Align the Elements for a little bit of damage reduction in between packs, but more importantly so that you can get to Mana Shield for a big damage reduction every time you spend 100 mana, which is going to be quite frequently. And then we're going to grab Protection, which is going to be giving us a barrier whenever we use a cooldown. And this is going to be one of the main kind of engines for generating lucky hits, because we're going to take Lucky Hit with Barrier on our helmet, or sorry, on our... Oh, you know what, I think I actually worked that out. You can put Lucky Hit with Barrier on your gloves, actually. I had that before, but I think I took it out. But either way, the extra barriers can give you a lot of extra toughness, and it's very important. We're going to take 1 point into Static Discharge to make it so that whenever we critical strike with our shock skills, we have a lucky hit chance to spawn Crackling Energies. And then 3 points into Invigorating Conduit to give us mana regen by grabbing up those Crackling Energy globes on the ground. Whenever we happen to run out of energy, we can just walk around, snatch those up, and refill it up. We're going to take a rank into Ball Lightning, rank into the Enhanced Ball Lightning, and a rank into Wizard's Ball Lightning so we can generate even more Cracking Lightnings. This is going to be one of our 2 enchantment slots. The other one is going to be the Lightning Spear, so whenever we pick up said Crackling Energies, we have a chance to spawn more Lightning Spears. We just want as many Lightning Spears as we can. We're going to take Unstable Currents and then both advanced talents on those to make them just work even better. And then we're going to take Coursing Currents so that hitting enemies with shock skills increases your critical strike chance by 3%, resets upon getting a critical strike, so basically you just maintain a critical mass of critical hit chance. You can move points out of this and put into some of the other points here if you wish. I found 3 was giving me the best results, but that might be a gear dependent thing. take 2 points into electrocution to reduce the damage the enemies take. If you find you're taking too much damage, take a point out of coursing currents and put it into electrocution to reduce the damage by an additional 5%. And then we're going to take a point into convulsion so that our shock skills have a lucky hit chance to stun enemies, which is going to be happening quite frequently. And then we're going to grab overflowing energy so that our crackling energy can reduce the cooldown on our unstable currents. My overall stats, I think, is actually kind of hidden, so let's go ahead and make this a little bit smaller. There we go. We are capped out on resistances. You will not be capped on resistances until you level up your glyphs, and that will cap you. But you'll get there eventually. Critical strike chance is at 31% right now, but I am in town. If I were to be leaving town, it would go up because of the movement speed on my boots and the SUs, whatever it is. But I'll kind of show you here what I mean. Alright, so I am off, and now my critical strike chance is 57.9%. And it'll just stack up as I kill things, so yay! Alright, let's go ahead and go back into town. Lucky hit chance, we're at 54%, but you could certainly get that higher. That's pretty adequate though, I think, to maintain this build. Now let's go ahead and have a look at the Paragon board. We're going to go ahead and minimize the gameplay footage now so we can expand this out and make it a little bit easier to read. We're going to start down here on our baseboard as we do, moving up and to the right so that we can grab the Elementalist node for non-physical damage and max life, plus additional non-physical damage with the bonus. In our glyph slot, we're going to be grabbing the Elementalist. Elementalist gives a 66% damage bonus to non-physical damage nodes in the area, giving us a whopping 23.1% non-physical damage boost and 5% to all resistances. But more important, as we do fire, lightning, and cold, which we'll be doing constantly, we give 5x multiplier for each element, so we'll constantly have a 15x multiplier up on the board. We're going to move over to the right and grab the Erudite resistance node in order to help cap our resistances, and then we're going to move over into the left to grab that non-physical resistance, and then up through elemental balance for more non-physical resistance and into our next board. On our next board, we're going to be picking up the elemental summoner, rotated as such. Moving up and over, we're going to grab Swift Conjurer for some attack speed and some conjuration damage, grab the nodes around it for a little bit more attack speed, a little bit more conjuration damage, and then we're going to go on over to Elemental Summoner. Elemental Summoner makes it so your conjuration skills have a 10x reduced cooldown or mana cost. 10% x reduced cooldown or mana cost. They also deal bonus damage equal to 3% x of the total amount of your bonus damage to fire, lightning, and cold, which currently for me is 28%, up to, I think it caps at 30. Maybe it doesn't cap at all. I don't know. But this is a node that basically amps up our lightning spear damage. We're going to move up and over to our glyph slot. Here we're going to be grabbing Conjurer. Conjurer is going to be giving us more conjuration skill damage, which is important for us, but more importantly, increase conjuration duration by 20% to keep those lightning spears up more often, to keep that 3% multiplier stacking. We're going to move on over to Erudite once again and grab the extra resistance and conjuration skill damage, and then on over to Conjurer to grab extra skill damage and intelligence. Then we're going to be moving down to the node of Keeper of the Elements, which is going to be giving us a 20% non-physical damage and a 3% all resist. This is important for capping out our resistances. Grab the non-physical damage around it to buff your damage even more, and that 1.5% all resist. Now let's go ahead and move up and over to our next board, which is going to be the Enchantment Master board. We're going to move down and over to the Ruinous node, which is a massive damage multiplier by giving us 20% non-physical damage and 16% damage to elites, which is absolutely bonkers. And we're going to be moving up and over to Elementalist for 20% more non-physical damage and 4% life, grabbing the nodes around it for a little bit more life and a little bit more non-physical damage, and then moving down and over. And since we're here, we might as well just grab this Suffuse Resilience anyway to reduce the damage we're taking over time and give us some more all resist. Then we're going to be moving down and over to Enchantment Master, which is going to be making our enchantments 20% stronger. Our enchantments, once again, are the chance to spawn a lightning spear when we grab crackling energy. So by increasing this, we increase the chance to conjure these. And then we're also going to be increasing our lucky hit chance to spawn ball lightning, so we get even more ball lightnings, even more crackling energies, even more lightning spears. It's all kind of cyclical and repeating. And repeating and cyclical. Alright, moving on. Now we're going to move on up to the glyph slot. For glyphs here, we're going to be grabbing Reinforced, which is going to be giving us a 25% non-physical damage boost, a 7.5 all resist boost, a 25 intelligence boost, and 15% damage reduction whenever we have a barrier, which is going to be whenever we use cooldowns, which is going to be pretty much all the time. Then we're going to move up and over, grab Elemental Balance for a whopping 45% non-physical damage bonus and 22 intelligence. Moving up and into our next board, now we're going to be grabbing the Destruction Glyph on the Static Surge board. But before we get there, go ahead and hop on over and grab the Overwhelming to get extra damage to stunned enemies and damage to elites. Then hop on up, grab Static Surge, which is going to give you a basically a vulnerable application. So whenever you spend 93 mana, your next charge bolt is going to make enemies vulnerable and restore 10% of your mana, also giving you some mana restore in the process. You're going to be spamming charge bolts, so this is going to always be proccing for you. On the glyph slot, we're going to be grabbing Destruction for more critical strike damage, which is just crazy at 174% crit damage. That's absolutely nuts. And then we're going to be grabbing Incapacitate for more damage to stunned enemies and a little bit more intelligence. Then we're going to pop up and over and grab Paralyzing for a little bit more damage to stunned enemies and some max mana to just kind of smooth out our mana restores. Actually, I think this board is supposed to be last, and you should be grabbing this board before this one, my bad. But on the Frigid Fate board, you're going to be moving up and over to grab Guarded, which is going to give you guard damage reduction from vulnerable enemies and a little bit of cold resist. Then up over to Advantage, which is a little bit more cold resist, but more importantly, lucky hit chance. This is really important. And then up and over to Frigid Fate, which is going to give us a damage to vulnerable enemies equal to 10x of the total amount of your bonus damage with cold, which we are not stacking any cold damage, but we are stacking non-physical damage, and that does count. So we're getting a whopping 29x damage multiplier here against vulnerable enemies. Just 1% short of that 30 cap, but I think we can get it there with the abattoirs here. We're gonna hop on up to Invocation, which is going to be giving us more critical strike damage with our Conjuration skills, and is going to be reducing the damage enemies deal to us by up to 12% as the lightning spears pulse through them, so that's pretty nice. And then Weakness is going to be giving us a little bit more vulnerable damage and chilling a little bit more cold resist and intelligence. And that is our Paragon board. Relatively easy. I will also post a link to this in the video description down below. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video and this build. I find it a lot of fun. It's pretty tanky. It's definitely capable of easily clearing that Nightmare tier 100 dungeon, and it should be pretty good for the abattoir of Zir. So if you guys like it, leave a comment down below, hit that thumbs up, subscribe for more content. I'm going to be doing a summoner build next, I think, or possibly a fire build. I had a fire build that I really liked. I need to do again, but I'd really like to do a summoner build before Abattoir of Zir comes out, so I'll probably do that this week. Anyway, make sure you like, favorite, share, subscribe, and thanks for being here, everyone. See you later.